Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is, of course, free to download and free to use. And it's brought to you by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and well-being for all. If you're watching the show, which you can totally do on our social media platforms, you'll notice I don't have a mic stand. I don't know where I put it, so I'm holding a microphone. This is the information that you tune into on a daily basis to hear. My thanks to DJ Michaels back at the Extra Sports 1300 studios for stepping up and helping me out today as I do the show from a bunker somewhere. Coming up on today's show, of course, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics. A lot going on. Nuggets in action last night. NFL trade deadline. My interview with Switchbacks president Brad Estes is coming up in less than 20 minutes. The club announcing today they have parted ways with both the head coach James Chambers and sporting director Stephen Hogan. I appreciate Brad taking time to join me today to discuss this further. And I've heard from a few of you on social media, so I know there are people very interested in what Brad has to say, as am I. So I appreciate the president of the club taking time to join me here in just a little bit. But I do want to start with the Broncos because last night I was up in Denver calling Air Force women's basketball. I want to talk about that as well on this show, but didn't get a chance to have our normal Monday get together where we discuss the Denver Broncos. So let's do it now. There's no rule against doing it on a Tuesday. Look, the Cowboys game was a nice diversion, shall we say, from what this Broncos season has been, what this Broncos team has been. But Sunday was kind of a return to regularly scheduled programming from this team. They are not a team that has an offense capable of pulling away from teams, blowing them out. They're not at that level. But they have a defense that will almost always keep them in the game. They will almost always have a chance to win. And right now, 4 of these 6 games that they have won in a row, they've been the better team in the fourth quarter. So I believe it was Sean Payton's mentor, Bill Parcells, who said, you are what your record says you are. The Broncos are a good football team, a very good football team. I think we have to come to that realization. But they're also what their game film looks like. They're also what you see on TV. There are no secrets about this team anymore. We're past the midway point of the season. This is who they are. And you could take that one of two ways. It just depends on what side of the football you choose to focus on. I continually look at this defense and say they're terrific. They're arguably the best in the league. And they're going to give the Broncos, who are well coached, who do have talent on offense, an opportunity to win the game. But if you want to focus on the offense, yeah, you're going to be a little disappointed with what you see because they're not what they were with Peyton Manning before the Super Bowl year. They're not going to put up Star Wars numbers. They're just, I don't know how many games we have to watch till we get to the point where, like, this is Bo Nix. He's not going to consistently connect on those deep passes. He's way too squirrely in the pocket. He's going to throw passes that are either well offline or, like he did on Sunday, should have been intercepted. That's just who he is. But the fourth quarter rolls around, and they're just, and I don't think even Bo Nix can put his finger on it. He's been asked about it before. He just transforms and he locks in, and this Broncos offense moves the ball and they win these games. They keep winning. 6 in a row now they've won. 4 of these 6 have followed the same script. I think we just have to say this is who they are. And I have no doubt that at some point, maybe this season, maybe next week, given who the opponent is, maybe it's in the playoffs, maybe it's in the Super Bowl. But at some point, the fact that they can't put together a complete 4-quarter performance will cost them. That will be the demise of this football team. The question is, when will that be? How far can this formula get them? And I'm looking at the back half of the schedule, and I'm saying 4 of their last 6 games, I believe the math, 5 of their last 6 opponents, maybe is the better way to put it because they have 2 with Kansas City. They can win this way. The only, and I would be saying this if the Broncos had the Bills on the schedule too, or the Rams, some of the elite teams in the National Football League right now, they might be exposed as a team that can't play 4 quarters. Look at the Buffalo-Kansas City game. That was a 4-quarter football game. Every play mattered. Every quarter mattered. Every drive mattered. And the Denver Broncos, following this same formula, I don't know if they're going to win games like that. But if the game is close going into the 4th quarter, I don't know how much you bet against these guys. I don't. And I'll pay them an additional compliment. I know a lot of people are going to focus on the fact that Davis Mills was the quarterback for most of that game. If I think they still beat Houston if CJ Stroud is the quarterback. I do. I don't think CJ Stroud is capable of pulling away from this defense. And the defense is what deserves the most credit for Sunday. Right? They're without the reigning defensive player of the year. And I'll be honest with you, I knew that Pat Surtain wasn't playing. Did you notice he wasn't playing? Were there plays, were there sequences where you're like, man, Broncos are really missing Pat Surtain right now? No, because the front 7, even though Vance Joseph could not commit as many numbers as he likes to do to the pass rush, they still were able to get to whatever Houston quarterback was back there 5 times. They did exactly defensively what I thought they would do, and they were incredibly effective at it. I don't think CJ Stroud wins the Houston Texans that game because this is just who the Broncos are. And unless you're a team that can consistently for 4 quarters perform on both sides of the football, you're not going to beat them. That's why I say there's every day that goes by, there's a smaller number of teams that I would take over the Denver Broncos. There are teams that exist, teams that will stand in their way of getting to where they ultimately want to go this season. But there aren't a lot of them between now and then. So the defense, I mean, you got to be an elite offensive team in order to beat them. And how have the Broncos arrived here? Because they have failed so miserably in these same situations all last year. Even into the beginning of this year, right? The Colts game, the Chargers game. This is a team that is, and I guess they're still a fairly young team, but they're growing up. They're evolving. They're learning from previous mistakes. The Broncos right now aren't even the most penalized team in the NFL anymore. They had that crown for like 7 weeks. This is a team that is progressing, that is fine-tuning and tweaking things to make them almost unbeatable in the fourth quarter. It's just a matter of, can you put them away before that? And the last 6 opponents have not been able to do that. Now, what brings forth this fourth quarter team, not just the learning, but what clicks with this team in the fourth quarter? I don't know how many times I have to say it. It's the run game. And I laughed out loud on my couch on Sunday when I heard the Fox sideline reporter regurgitate what Sean Payton told her at the halftime, saying we need to find balance. Like, dude, you are the guy to find the balance. You are responsible for the balance. You're the guy with run it written on the top of your play sheet. I don't know how. I mean, it's been almost every game of this 6-game winning streak where I'm like, what changed with the Broncos offense? Yeah, Bo Nix elevates his game, but what starts it? The running game. Through 3 quarters, Sean Payton wants to throw it around, and not all the time is deep downfield passes, but he just calls a lot of passing plays. And it doesn't work. And lo and behold, here comes the fourth quarter. All right, J.K. Dobbins, time for you to go. He does. Sprinkle in some R.J. Harvey. And then all of a sudden, the Broncos offense gets rolling. So the only way that I feel like the Broncos can change my mind about what they are is if Sean Payton goes to the run game earlier. And you saw an additional part of the run game on Sunday. Bo Nix with 2 big runs to put the Broncos in field goal range. That's something that you and I have been discussing and calling for weeks now. And there were numerous times throughout the game I thought Bo Nix could tuck it and run. Daryl Johnston mentioned a couple of times. I think he's so deathly afraid of Sean Payton that he doesn't want to run unless he absolutely has to. But I still hold out. That's the one reservation. That's the one caveat. If Bo Nix all of a sudden becomes a more consistent runner of the football, as in he runs the football more, because there are not a lot of times where he's not productive running the football. There was one time, I think, on Sunday where he wasn't. And ironically, it was on a designed run. But that's the one thing I say, okay, if this Broncos team is more than what it is right now, that's the way. The defense is maxed out, playing at a really high level. J.K. Dobbins has been terrific. I think the skill position players are who they are. I think Bo Nix, except for the running ability, is who he is. As a thrower, he is this guy. But not to sound like too much like Stuart Smalley from those old SNL things, but it's enough. It's been enough for 6 weeks. It's been enough for this team to be tied for the top record in the AFC. It will cost them at some point. I know it will. But is it going to be at a juncture where you're going to be like, all right, a little disappointed, but at least they got here? What is the expectation? Now that they're tied with the Colts atop the AFC, is it Super Bowl? Is it winning a playoff game? What is that? And you could tell me at 719-247-1313. But I mean, it's been 6 weeks. With only 2 exceptions to the rule that is the Denver Broncos. You have to beat them through 3 quarters or you're going to lose in the fourth quarter. And it happened again on Sunday. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Broncos win. NFL trade deadline passed with no moves for the Denver Broncos. I'll tell you who you can blame, and he's not in Denver. He's in New York. But coming up next, I will be joined by the president of Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC, Brad Estes, as the team has decided to part ways with head coach James Chambers and sporting director Stephen Hogan. That interview is next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. With the increased interest in my guest coming up, I'll just let everybody know that if you want to hear our next conversation, you will have to do so um, by listening to your radio or streaming it. We'll make the interview available, of course, on social media afterwards. But with that being said, Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC today announced they have parted ways with head coach James Chambers and sporting director Stephen Hogan. Kind enough to join me now on the show is the president of the club, Brad Estes. Brad, really appreciate you joining me on I'm sure, a very busy day for you. Why did the club decide to ultimately make this move? Oh, I'm having some trouble hearing you, Brad. DJ, can you put him in my ear, please, so I can hear Brad? Brad, can you hear me? I can't hear him, DJ. We're having some issues with me being remote and trying to connect the two of us together, and we'll try to work on that here and get that underway. I know a lot of you want to hear from Brad, and I appreciate his time. Hopefully, we can get him turned up in the studio. Maybe I can hear that way, DJ. But can I hear him, Brad? You got me? Okay. Thank you for your patience there. So please, if you don't mind, um, restating your answer on why the club felt like now was the right time to part ways with James Chambers and Stephen Hogan. You mentioned some of the things that went wrong this season. What is the main thing that you think is missing from making this thing sustainable and consistently competing for championships? Mhm. Brad Estes, the president of Switchbacks FC, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. What is the timeline for hiring a new sporting director? And you did say in your release that you're going to start immediately. What does that ideal candidate look like to you? Soccer is a global game, Brad. How far is this net going to be cast? And as you know, the season gets here before we know it. When would be the ideal time to have a new head coach in place? The remaining staff members that were under James Chambers, are they, uh, I guess, is it up to the new head coach whether he would like to retain that staff? Okay. And maybe I'm asking you to take me too far inside, and I appreciate if you can't, but are you conducting the search and presenting that to the board? Is the board gonna be active in this search? How is that gonna work with the new power dynamic in the organization? Mhm. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of news about USL Division 1, the new top tier league that's coming in 2028. Is it the club's intention to be a part of that? All right. And do you know when you're supposed to like say, is there, do you come out and say, yes, we're going, or how does that work? Uh, yeah, a lot going on, as you said. Well, Brad, I very much appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and I look forward to the next time we get a chat, which is probably when you have a new head coach in place. You bet. That is Brad Estes, president of Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC, joining me here on a, and Brad said it at the top here. You can take me out of my ears, DJ. Echoing. Thank you. Um, look, and he said it off the top that it was not an easy decision for the club to make. And I can certainly vouch for the level of human being both James Chambers and Stephen Hogan are. Um, Brad, in his answer, kind of went right to what was going to be my next question, which is this performance based? You know, my just taking you inside of my thought process today. I go, you know, you see this all the time in sports. New ownership comes in or a new general manager, and this thought that they want to bring in their people. And sometimes it's not even about the performance on the field or on the ice or the court. It's just about, this is my team now, or our team, since the Switchbacks have a board of directors. We want to make our stamp on this organization, and the best way, easiest way you can do it is by making a change on the on-field leadership. So I was going to ask how much of this is performance driven, but Brad uh, answered it right away. He said this absolutely was, not in so many words said absolutely, I'm characterizing, but he said this was about the up and down nature of the season, the lack of consistency uh, in tactics and recruiting and all of the things that Brad mentioned. So that was my initial thought. I was going to open it up to him to, you know, speak as to why the club made this decision. But then my immediate follow up was going to be, was this performance based? But this seems performance based more than anything else, not just simply a new leadership group trying to make their stamp on the team. They were not pleased with the results this season. As much affinity as they may have for James Chambers and Stephen Hogan. And this is a club that was the reigning champions. The fact of the matter is, in many ways, they backed into the playoffs. But they were still there. And I think for some people watching this club this year, they would say just getting into the playoffs, that was good. After a repeat year, rebuild, reload, and go after it. But this is an organization that saw some things that they said I don't want to put words into Brad's mouth, but just kind of listening to him and interpreting it, and giving my thought that they had questions of whether they could, under the leadership that they had with James Chambers and Stephen Hogan, rebuild, reload. They felt like they needed a different program in place. And that ultimately was their reason to make this move. And I welcome your thoughts on the matter. 719-24/7, 1313. If you're on social media watching the show, you could comment right there and let me know your thoughts on James Chambers and Stephen Hogan being let go, and what you just heard from Brad Estes. If you did not hear it because maybe you're watching on social media or you're just tuning in now, we will re-air that interview on Extra Sports 1300 in the 5 o'clock hour. So that'll give you another chance, and we'll take the audio and post it on social media. And I do very much appreciate Brad joining me on the show to be able to discuss this and give his thoughts. And I thought I appreciate his candor. So we'll go from there. 719-24/7, 1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. 719-24-7, 1313 is the number. If you want to text into the show and give your thoughts, just got done speaking with Brad Estes, the president of Switchbacks FC, on the club's decision to part ways with head coach James Chambers and sporting director Stephen Hogan. Got a couple of texts in that I want to get to from the 719. Sad to see Chambers and Hogan departing. Understand the desire of club management to take the club further. Hoping new coach hire before tryouts in January. Would like to see their stamp on all recruitments going into 2026. I think this will move quickly. I do. And I mentioned it with Brad during our conversation. The season, as you know, it's a bummer that we've spent the last 3 days lamenting the Switchbacks bowing out in the playoffs against Tulsa on Saturday. But, gosh, we'll have the holidays come out and we're like, oh, it's already the season. So I don't think it's going to take long. And this is just my own, all the inside information that I have was given to me by Brad Estes just now. So you have all the information I do. I feel like not hiring a sporting director concurrently with the head coach, I think is intentional. I think it's intentional for a recruitment tool to say, because we see this all the times, right? Misalignment between the front office and the coaching staff. I think this is a way, I think this is them prioritizing what position they want to land the biggest fish, so to speak, with, and then say, we want to create synergy with the front office, with the soccer decisions, and we go out and find somebody like that. And look, every organization is different. There are some organizations that have a dual role guy, that the head coach is the one that's, burning up the phones and making the calls and trying to bring in people. But Tulsa, the team that the Switchbacks just lost to, that is the best team in the West, they have a technical director. They have a front office executive, and then they have their head coach. So my overall thought, how this front office or how this organization is going to be structured moving forward, we'll wait and see. But I think ultimately this is them prioritizing what do we need more than anything else. And you heard Brad Estes mention, a system and a program that's implemented by the head coach. So if, and one thing that really bit the Switchbacks this year was injuries. And we've seen other organizations, I think the Broncos were in this position not too long ago, where they had a rash of injuries and they had to fix that. Like, they felt like it wasn't just bad luck, that maybe there was something behind all this that was leading to the injuries, and they've made some changes, and they've been quite healthy over the years since they've done that. And I think that's probably part of this too. But ultimately, it's, I think, a team that was inconsistent throughout the year, that just barely got into the postseason with many of the same players that hoisted a trophy. I think there was a clear need on this team for a bona fide goal scorer. They tried to do that with Kyle Vassell. Once again, injuries didn't work out. But there was a clear need on this team for much of the season that they couldn't for a variety of reasons. Justin Dillon was there, then he wasn't. Kyle Vassell was there, then he was banged up. But again, I think my biggest takeaway is that this is not so much a new ownership group trying to just simply put their stamp on this club as quickly as they can. This is a lack of results. This is performance-based. This from the 719. Hard to believe that consistency was the problem. Hoagie and Chambo have been the same and consistent the entire time they were here. Injuries plagued the midfield since the start of the season. Also, Hoagie and Chambo were the product of this ownership group going to have to nail the next hire to have this make sense. Well, I have to push back a little bit at one of your points there. Because Stephen Hogan and James Chambers came to Colorado Springs when Brendan Burke arrived. And this was, and then and then Brendan Burke left. Stephen Hogan took over. Then he went upstairs, so to speak, and James Chambers became the head coach. All these guys were here under Brendan Burke. The ownership change happened after that. So now could there be an argument that the new ownership group could have made a move? I mean, they just took control of the club this year. So I think you're absolutely right about the midfield. Roland and I talked about this on Saturday's broadcast. They didn't have Anthony Fontana. One of their big acquisitions this offseason was having a good year. They didn't have him on Saturday. They didn't have Zach Zandy down the stretch. They didn't have Marco Micheletto. So the midfield was beat up. So you're right about that. And injuries are a big part of this. But I go back to, I think Brad sees something behind the scenes that maybe could be improved to help prevent injuries. And that will certainly be something that I am going to ask the next head coach of the Switchbacks. Is there something that can be done about a rash of injuries, or are injuries just out and out bad luck? Let's see. This one coming in from the 719, sad about Chambo pulling for McCann, that being Alan McCann as a replacement. Sporting director was a new position spun by Hogan to begin with. Other organizations do have a GM, more American model of front office, if you will, with kind of a general manager. And then this last text in the series, it may simply be an acknowledgement that they don't need that role right now. Again, that could be. I think I'm not going to press Brad on that because I think he was very, I think he was as open as he was willing to be, as open as maybe he could be. I think it's this we got to get right first. And throughout the interview process, I'm sure some of their candidates are going to say, hey, I could use another set of eyes. I could use somebody, making the phone calls, shopping for the groceries, to use a Bill Parcells line. I think they want to make sure that it's a clean slate and it's not, and I'm going to use this word, and I don't mean it in a negative context, but saddling the next head coach with previous staff members. Right? Brad Estes did say that like Alan McCann, the assistant coaches under James Chambers will, if they want to be, they will be up for positions on the new staff, and that's ultimately up to the next head coach. But I think they wanted to clean the slate. That's why both of them are out today. And I think through the interviewing process, they will get a better idea of what they think the front office and the staff should look like. Another text from the 719, right? But the ownership group was a part of the decision making in bringing Brendan Burke in, and then they were the ones that pushed for Chambo and Hoagie combo. Widener pushed more than the Reagans for them to stay. You may have another level of, I know, like obviously Widener Apartment Homes, now the majority owners, the owners of the Switchbacks, they had partial ownership before. Maybe they had every intention. Maybe, you're fine with everything down the line, and then until you're not fine with it. Right? They wanted to keep some continuity in place. So when Brendan left, it wasn't, let's start a big, wide search. Let's keep it in-house. Let's elevate. And the Widener group was a part of the ownership group, but a minority stake. So were they a controlling vote? Were they a dissenting vote? I don't know. But it's kind of the best laid plans, right? They wanted to keep the consistency, and they tried to give it a go, and this year just wasn't what they wanted it to be. So I guess you're not wrong in saying that Widener signed off in some way because they are a part of the ownership group, but they weren't the controlling owners. And I'm not in those rooms to say that they were totally on board. I don't know that. But the fact of the matter is, and we see this all the time in sports, you go out and you think you think they made the right decision in hiring a coach, and then you find out, nope, wasn't the right decision. So I think that could be at play here. That they thought that keeping the continuity, that elevating Stephen Hogan and then elevating James Chambers would continue this thing and keep it rolling. And then it didn't. And then that's when they decided to make the move. 719-247-1313. Continue to take your thoughts. And I'll take this time here. I got a couple minutes. I just want to say, as someone who has worked closely with James Chambers and Stephen Hogan, I don't want to be, ignore the human aspect of this and just say, okay, who's the next person in? Because I had a relationship with those two gentlemen, a working relationship with them. I talk to them on a weekly basis, and I feel for them. Because I am sure, like you, wanted all of this to work out. But that's the business side of sports. But on a human level, Stephen Hogan and James Chambers are of the highest quality. And I thoroughly enjoyed working with both of them. And I am sad to see both of them go. Because of who they are, I think that they will land on their feet. I think they will be employed somewhere, and I wouldn't be shocked if James Chambers or Stephen Hogan are visiting Widener Field in the near future as on an opposing team. But I think the world of those two, and I wish it would have worked out. 719-247-1313. And answering the question for those of you just coming in, because I'm remote today, and no, Brett, I'm not in a bathroom. You say that every time I do this. But I'm remote today. I'm at home. I'll just be 100% honest. This is where I am. I'm at home. We couldn't get the audio from Brad onto the live stream. Some of you checking in on the live stream, but we will post the interview on social media here soon at Extra Sports 1300, and you can listen to the interview in its entirety there. But yeah, can't pull Brad onto the stream. If we were in studio, we'd be able to pull some of this off, but yeah, I certainly was not planning. If I would have known this news was coming down, I don't think I would have made this a remote broadcast day. I'll just say that much. But we got the interview done despite some challenges, and we'll have that available for you if you'd like to hear it for yourself. We don't have to drop this topic. If you want to send in your thoughts, I do want to pivot slightly after the top of the hour because the NFL trade deadline has come and gone. The Denver Broncos did nothing. And why? You will be very happy to pin it on the person I'm going to pin it on. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Calling in from 1993, it's Drive Time Sports with me, Ryan Kaufman. Glad to have you. Appreciate you guys watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, at XTRA Sports 1300. Also on my personal social media accounts, at Gingerly Tweets on X and at Gingewatch on Instagram. The big story of the day, if you are just joining us on a hyper local level, the Colorado Springs Switchbacks have decided to part ways with head coach James Chambers, as well as sporting director Stephen Hogan. Brad Estes, the president of the club, joined me last hour and said the biggest takeaway to me was that it was performance-based. This was not, hey, just the new ownership group or the different ownership group, however you want to phrase it, because the Widener Group did have an ownership stake of this club before, but now they're in full control of the organization. It wasn't just about putting their own stamp on it. It was because they watched this team this year and did not think the results were where they needed to be. And they're going to start the search for a head coach that can bring them that immediately. And the Mosh, what up, the Mosh, on Instagram says, I'm surprised he laid the blame on this season performance. Man, if we don't go deep into the playoffs next year. And that's going to be the thing moving forward. Because the fact of the matter is, James Chambers was the head coach of the Switchbacks when they won a title last year. And he was the head coach of a playoff team this year. And that immediately sets the standard incredibly high for the next person that takes over that job. And I think, obviously, that's why there was so much shock. And it's funny, there are some times where my phone kind of blows up a little bit when it comes to a sports story. The Luka trade was one of them. Usually when the Broncos and the Chiefs play, I hear from a lot of people. And today was one of those days. And it's just because of the shock of it all, I think. But the shock of, wait a minute, this team just went to the playoffs. But this team was on top the year before. They fell to the last playoff spot in the West. So they did regress this year. I think a lot of people that I have heard from say that as I think a lot of people saw what maybe Brad Estes and the club saw. The inconsistency. And I think for some people it was for fans. I see your posts, Trailheads, not always on Facebook, but I see it. The frustration over the inconsistency, I think you felt as fans as well. But I think a lot of people arrived at the conclusion, well, they got to the playoffs. Right? A circuitous route to the postseason, albeit, but they got there. But this is being the Switchbacks, I think, are being very process oriented with this and not so much results driven to say, oh, we made the playoffs, that's good enough. What they saw, even in making the playoffs, wasn't good enough. But now, to Jason's point, the standard is up here. And if you're listening on radio, I have my hand well above my head. we'll see where it's going to be an interesting offseason. That's for sure. 719-247-1313. If you want to weigh in, you can hear the interview again in the 5 p.m. hour, and then we will post it on social media. Obviously, a lot of interest across the country regarding the news today. So we'll get that up there. I may actually, DJ was asking me about this because he's a good producer, and I'm like, and maybe DJ, maybe if you want to pull it, we can get it posted sooner rather than later. Speaking of moves or lack thereof, just shifting gears for a moment, we could stay on the switchbacks thing moving forward through the hour if you want to weigh in. But the Broncos today did not make a move at the trade deadline. No moves. On a day that I have to say exceeded expectation. The NFL trade deadline normally is never as good as it's being hyped up to be. It's almost always a disappointment. But today you have the New York Jets finally acknowledging, yes, we know who we are. We know where we're going, which is nowhere. And we're going to rebuild this thing. And they traded Quinnen Williams to the Dallas Cowboys. Perhaps they could have used Quinnen Williams last night against the Cardinals and against the Broncos the week prior. And then they traded Sauce Gardner to the Colts. And I know the initial reaction from a lot of people, because Sauce Gardner went to the Colts in kind of a blockbuster deal, if we're being honest, that was going to put more pressure on the Broncos. Right? This arms race that happens. Keeping up with the Joneses. So I knew that would raise the stakes. If this trade deadline came and went, and Quinnen Williams was the biggest name that got traded, and he gets traded as he did to an NFC team, maybe some Broncos fans would be like, okay, like a little disappointed they didn't make a move, but at least no one else did. Well, the Colts did. The team that the Broncos are in a virtual tie with atop the American Football Conference made a significant move. And the Broncos did nothing. And I think part of the reason why the Broncos did nothing, you can blame Russell Wilson. Because this is the first time since the Broncos cut Russell Wilson that it has actually cost them anything. Right? They've been just fine without Russell Wilson. Or I should put it this way. They've been just fine with Russell Wilson's cap hit, with that largest dead cap hit in NFL history. They've been just fine. They go out and get Bo Nix. They've been able to get Hufanga and J.K. Dobbins and Evan Ingram. It's been all good. You haven't even noticed that the Broncos have this huge dead cap hit. But today you did. Because what did I see from a lot of Broncos insiders as we got closer to 2 o'clock Mountain Time? Keep in mind, they only have less than $5 million in cap space. Funny, I did not hear a lot of this leading up to today, but I heard a lot of it today. Makes you wonder. But this was always the reality. They had $5 million in cap space yesterday, a week ago, a month ago. And it's a reality. Right? Why do they only have $5 million of cap space? Because they're still paying Russell Wilson. So you could pin a little bit of this on Russell Wilson if you want. I know very few people in Broncos country would pass up an opportunity to do that. But what I also take that as, some of this stuff starts getting floated out there through reporters, kind of laying the groundwork for, hey, we're not going to do anything. So let's go ahead and make sure people understand that we don't have a lot of money. I think that the Broncos throughout the day realized that they weren't going to make a move. And the question becomes, is it inability truly? Is it that less than $5 million of cap space? Or was it unwillingness? Or did they feel like it wasn't necessary, which would fall under unwillingness? I think it might be the latter. As much as the 4 point whatever million dollars in cap space, as much as that is real, go to your favorite salary cap tracking website, that's real. But we have found out where there is a will, there is a way, especially in the National Football League. John Elway once went to Peyton Manning and asked him to restructure his contract. Do not tell me that the Broncos couldn't have walked up. The organization that threatened to bench Russell Wilson if he did not defer his injury guarantee, that organization is shy about going up to players and asking them to restructure their deal. I don't believe that. I think the salary cap thing is a little convenient, if I'm being honest. A little convenient. What I think this was an unwillingness to be ultra aggressive, an unwillingness to give up premium draft capital, which the Colts did to get Sauce Gardner. They were unwilling to do that. And I think and I'll focus on the skill positions because that's really what this is, right? There could have been a depth move on the offensive line or something like that where you would go, oh, that's a smart bit of business, football business. But let's be honest, it's what the fans wanted was a weapon for Bo Nix. If they were to go out, and I'm not saying George Pickens was available, but let's throw out George Pickens as a albeit extreme example. You think that's the kind of guy that's going to jive with Sean Payton's program? Do you think that Sean Payton has the collection of skill players that he has by accident? No. Sean Payton does not want big egos coming into his locker room. And the position where those egos are maybe bigger than they are on any other part of the field, receiver. I think I'll say no name. I mean, people know the name Cortland Sutton. They're starting to know the name Marvin Mims, but I think for the most part, it's a relatively unknown wide receiving core, and Sean Payton wants it that way. I don't think he wants somebody going back to Bo Nix after he airmails a 30-yard pass down the field and going and chewing on his young quarterback. And my question to you is that okay? Is the decision to go, I'll call it culture over production, is that all right with you? Is it okay that the Denver Broncos really want to hang on to their premium draft capital? That's the first part of this. The second part of this, really assess who the Denver Broncos are. And I started the show today by talking about this recipe for their success that keeps playing out week in and week out. Watch Bo Nix throw the football and tell me what wide receiver would make him better at that. Because I think eventually the Broncos are going to have to bite the bullet and bring in a bigger ego at the skill positions in order to upgrade that group. But is there somebody out there that was traded today? Let's take Shaheed from the Saints, who goes to the Seahawks. Deep threat, right? Do you trust Bo Nix to be able to hit him downfield? I don't know that I do. So why bring him in? And I don't know if Shaheed has an ego on him. I'm just saying, if the idea is to get a wide receiver that allows the Denver Broncos to be more dynamic and to hit big plays down the field, I don't think that's a receiver problem. I think that's a Bo Nix problem. And I think Sean Payton has coached Bo Nix because the way he has because of that. Now, is there Garrett Wilson? The Jets may or may not have been interested in trading him. I think it's never one thing. I do think Sean Payton and George Payton are unwilling to part with their premium draft capital. I do think there is a control aspect with Sean Payton where he does not want to bring in a big ego into this locker room. I think that is a part of it. But I just think you have to ask yourself, what was out there that legitimately helps the Denver Broncos? Because I don't think a big play, deep threat receiver is that. Marvin Mims was that, is supposed to be that. Remember? And how do they use him? On wide receiver reverses and screens. There's a reason. So I get the emotion of it's an arms race and you see the team that the Broncos are tied with making a big move and you want your team to make a big move. I don't know if there was one out there to be made. Don't give me the salary cap stuff. Stop. If there was somebody the Broncos wanted and they were willing to give up the draft capital and willing to bring in the ego or all that kind of stuff, they would have gotten it done from a cap perspective. I think they don't want to pay too high of a price to bring in somebody that is going to demand more out of Bo Nix than perhaps he is capable of. And I don't think, Sean Payton has any intent on making this a deep downfield. I think he would love to, but I think he realizes what his quarterback is and is not. And the best news here is it's working. But I'll take your thoughts on the Broncos standing pat at the trade deadline. Are you frustrated, or do you think that the Broncos have all they need, having won 6 in a row? 719-24-7-1313. Back after this. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. A lot going on today. Let's get to your thoughts at 719-247-1313. This from the 719. Hey, Ryan, went to the Nuggets game last night. Figured Westbrook lights it up and plays out of his mind. But I think Cam Johnson in 10 days will step up and quit being so tentative. I like their nucleus. I like what Jamal Murray is doing. You love yoga? That might be an autocorrect. I love Gordon, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I love yoga too. I just don't think it's pertains to the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, what Russell Westbrook last night, if there's I think you're right. If there's any player to be, I don't want to say petty, because the Nuggets told him, and he said this after the game, the Nuggets told him, like, we don't want you to pick up your player option. If you do it, we're going to sit you at the end of the bench. You don't have a role with this team anymore. How would you take that if that's what you were told? So he went somewhere that wanted him, and that was Sacramento. So good for him. But if there's anybody that was going to, you know how I love revenge games. If there's anybody that was going to make that happen, it was Russell Westbrook, and he was great last night. Problem is the Sacramento Kings aren't a very good basketball team, and the Nuggets, to your point, are outstanding. I read somewhere they have 3 wire-to-wire wins this season, and they had 5 all of last year. They're not messing around. Like, they're not unbeatable, right? They've lost games. But there's a seriousness to the way that they are approaching it. And if they can get out to an early lead and keep that lead up, they do. They're not, sitting back. And look, part of the reason why they have these wire-to-wire wins is because of the bench. Bruce Brown last night was fantastic. Jonas Valanciunas, what he has brought to this team. It's the way they're approaching these games. It's their execution level, but it's also the fact that they can turn to their bench even without Nikola Jokic on the floor and still be able to stay in it, maintain a lead. Yeah, the lead's going to shrink. Last night, David Adelman even threw out an entire bench lineup, which I thought was never going to happen. Like, you got to stagger Jamal Murray with the second unit. You can't throw out 5 bench players. Well, David Adelman did, and they were -1, which is actually for a bench unit not that bad, especially for what the Nuggets bench unit has been. They look really good right now. And I think they just, every day that goes by, are just showing, like, hey, if it's not the Thunder, it's us. And I think they're right. I would not put another, other than Oklahoma City, I wouldn't put another team above the Denver Nuggets right now. Not with the way they're playing, not with how good the bench has been, and how good Jamal Murray has looked. Did you see that pass that Nikola Jokic made last night that literally, like, made Domantas Sabonis's hair go back, like it combed his hair back as he threw it for an assist? That was insane. I mean, that's got to be in the pantheon of the greatest passes Nikola Jokic has ever made. 1 centimeter lower, and he's bouncing it off the forehead of Domantas Sabonis. And yet it ends up in a teammate's hands for a bucket. You know, Nikola Jokic said the other day, we got to stop saying it's effortless. It's not effortless. But that's what immense talent looks like to people. And it's a lot of hard work that Nikola Jokic has put in to be this good. So he's right, but how would you describe the way that he plays? It's effortless. It looks effortless, and it's a credit to him and how he has honed his game. But the greats make it look effortless. We know it's not effortless. We know there's an effort that goes into it behind the scenes, but it manifests itself on the court as it looks like he's not even trying and putting up 34 points, 14 assists, and 7 rebounds. Nuggets get the win last night over the Sacramento Kings. Of course, that was the first visit to Ball Arena from Nick Clifford, Colorado Springs native, former CSU Ram. He scored 8 points in 19 minutes. I saw Tyler King of the Gazette took a picture of just Nick's cheering section at Ball Arena, and it was a ton of people. So that's really cool to see. Got to be a surreal moment for Nick to be walking into the. I mean, how many times do you think Nick has gone to a Nuggets game or just an event? I know they do state wrestling there. Haven't they played? I don't know at Vanguard that he would have had the opportunity to do this. But I mean, just think about the number of events, especially Nuggets games that he has been to over the years. And now he's not in the stands. He's on the court looking up into the stands and seeing all of his people there cheering him on. What a cool moment last night. He played well. Played well. Continues to play well as a rookie for the Sacramento Kings. And let's just say there's some upward mobility on that roster. He can carve out a niche. He can have a role with that team because overall they're not a great team. Russell Westbrook last night. Russell Westbrook was really good. It was good Westbrook. Problem is, if you're the Denver Nuggets, you can't live with bad Russ. And look, Clippers, Lakers, Thunder, etc. Eventually, Sacramento is going to get to this point that they can't deal with the ups and downs, the high variance. They can't do it. And that's the decision that the Nuggets made. They like good Westbrook. They can't deal with bad Westbrook. And for a team that's trying to win a title, a team that especially is trying to normalize the bench unit, so to speak, or stabilize would be the better word, to stabilize it, to have Russell Westbrook being the focal point of that, you can't do that. It's not going to happen. You're going to have super high highs and super low lows, and the Nuggets are like, we're not going to be doing that anymore. Can't blame them. From this 719, Clifford had a monster dunk, and once he learns how to shoot it, he's going to be a very good NBA player. That has been part of Nick's evolution in his game. He has worked incredibly hard to be a better shooter than he's been at every level. He worked really hard at it at CU, but especially when he got to CSU. And now, to your point, it's another level that he has to go. It's another notch. To be an NBA shot maker is, I mean, a jump, a quantum leap from being a shot maker in college. And I'll give you one guy that was on the court last night with Neek that should give Neek and you a reason to believe that he can continue to add to that part of his game. Look at Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon's been in the lead for a decade, and now he's knocking down threes among the most efficient shooters in the NBA. So Neek can add that. He can build on that for sure. But cool moment for him. And the Nuggets pick off another win. 719-24-7. 13-13, your thoughts. Broncos, Nuggets, NFL trade deadline, and the big local story of the day, Switchbacks FC parting ways with head coach James Chambers and sporting director Stephen Hogan. You will be able to hear my interview with Switchbacks president Brad Estes next hour. In the meantime, I'll take your thoughts on Extra Sports 1300. Back here on Drive Time Sports. A lot going on today. The big news locally, James Chambers and Stephen Hogan out in their respective roles with Switchbacks FC. Brad Estes, the president of the club, joined me last hour. We'll post that interview on social media tonight, and also air that for you next hour. It was performance-based, and the word was consistency, as in a lack of it in terms of results, in terms of bringing in players to fortify the roster. And now they move forward to try and hire their next head coach. And I saw a message that Jason sent in on Facebook. This was earlier. If you're a Switchbacks fan, you've been through this a lot, probably more than you would care to. There's been quite a bit of turnover when it comes to the head coaching position for the Switchbacks, and even as they've tried to keep consistency by elevating Brendan Burke's assistants, it still has led to a lack of consistency, right? And a lot of turnover. And so I would understand if Switchbacks fans are a little bit like, again, this is happening. But I know I don't have to ask Brad Estes or anybody from the Switchbacks this question. I know the answer already. How many of those people did they hire? What happened when the Switchbacks were playing out east in Colorado Springs is not a huge concern of the board. And I mean, they were around, they were a part of it. To Texter's earlier point, right? They had a say in things, they had an ownership stake. But Brad Estes just got here, and he was brought in from arguably the best organization this league has to offer in Louisville. Right? He knows what it looks like. He knows what consistency looks like, consistent results, consistent production. And that's what he's being brought in from Louisville to create here in Colorado Springs. And I think and I don't want to say you just have to push past it, because James Chambers and Stephen Hogan were members of this community. A lot of you as fans got to know them. I certainly got to know them very well, broadcasting the games. But once that subsides, the disappointment and how disappointed you are that two really good people lost their jobs today, I think you can appreciate that a standard has been set now of what it's supposed to look like, and being the 8th seed in the West is not good enough. Bowing out in the first round isn't good enough. The Switchbacks are raising the stakes here, and I asked Brad Estes about the Division 1, and he said that's not what they're focused on, and they got other things, and that's down the road, and that's fine. I'll just insert my own commentary here. I think that club has every intention of being in that league. I have not been directly told that by anyone in the organization. I want to make that incredibly clear. But I think, doesn't today's news and what you heard from Brad Estes last hour kind of speak to that? If they're raising the standard for this organization, why wouldn't that be a part of it? And there are some steps that have to be taken here. There's some things that have to be done, probably with the stadium and everything like that. But my gut feel is that when the USL and Tony Scholes, who just took over the job as leading this new division, coming over from the Premier League, says, show of hands, who wants to be in this new league? I would almost guarantee the Switchbacks' hand would be up. I think they want to be a part of this league. I think they can believe they can be a part of this league. I mean, wouldn't that fit all of this? 8 seed in the West, not good enough. There was a time where the Switchbacks, we would love to see the Switchbacks as the 8 seed. Not anymore. 5 straight playoff appearances, a title, 8 seed, not good enough. I feel like the perfect embodiment of the standard being raised is to play at the highest division that the USL has to offer. That league comes in 2028. We saw today elsewhere in the league, North Carolina FC somehow trying to pull off we are ceasing operations for this upcoming season, and we don't worry, we will be back for this new league. That's going to be tricky. But we're going to start to see some news trickle out about all of this. Who else wants in? I think the Switchbacks have something more right in front of them that they got to take care of. A few things, actually. But once the vision starts to be, crystallized a little bit, and it starts to be the time where teams got to kind of say, yeah, we want in, I think the Switchbacks are going to be a part of it. I would be surprised if they didn't. And look, even if they don't want to be, even if they're like, you know what, we're not immediately volunteering, we're talking about promotion and relegation. So, okay, you're not one of the initial teams that are in this new league. Certainly the Switchbacks have designs on, let's say they stay at League 2. You don't think they have aspirations to move up, to get promoted, to win promotion in the very near future? I don't know what's going to go into all of that in terms of who gets to be the first teams in the division. And maybe it has to do with the stadium. Maybe there are some demands on that maybe the Switchbacks end up saying, yeah, we're not ready for that. And then you see what the standards are, in other leagues that do promotion and relegation. You got to add some seats here. So we don't even know what all that's going to be, what all the requirements are going to be. We've heard some, and the Switchbacks check those boxes except for the stadium, except for the seats they have at the stadium. And I've theorized before, in order to get enough teams in that league, they may need to say, all right, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. But whether they're a part of this top division in 2 years initially or not, they're going to want to be promoted there. They're going to want to compete. And that, in the mind of Brad Estes, and I think he speaks for the board of Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC, they have every intention of playing in that league one way or another. Oh, this from the 719. The market, 15,000 capacity minimum for League One. Our market isn't big enough. That was the other thing. So you're right. I forgot about the market size. I think when they came out, they said market size. But again, by 2028, given the way that Colorado Springs is growing, they might be around there. maybe. And the stadium was the other thing. But again, I think the bigger point is they're going to want to play in that league at some point. Whether they have check enough boxes to be immediately placed in that league. And you heard Brad Estes say it, we're focused on being the best League Two team that we can be. That might be a little bit of a hint there, maybe, maybe not. But the best Division II team, the best League Two team, Tier 2 team, however you want to phrase it, gets to go to that bigger league or the top league. So very interesting day. And again, I appreciate Brad Estes taking the time to join me today. And I appreciate you tuning in and listening to it. More interest in today's program than usual, which I absolutely love. And that's kind of one of the things that I've gone around and around with people about, the Switchbacks and their role in all of this. Is there an appetite for people to talk Switchbacks, to have an outlet to do it? Well, today, to me, proved you want this. And as this coaching search opens up and we start hearing about candidates and wins higher, I'm going to be talking about it. So I think the interest level, with the interaction, the number of views, all this kind of stuff tells me today's news resonated with people and they were interested in it. So appreciate that from you. You'll be able to hear my interview with Brad Estes if you missed it. Next hour, we'll also post it on social media. Don't forget, coming up later this evening, it will be a rematch of the 2022 Stanley Cup Final as the Avs take on the Lightning. That will start. I'll just be honest. I'd love for you to tune in. Just stay tuned into this radio station all night. Just let you know, it's going to be closer to 8 o'clock when the Avs drop the puck against the Lightning. But it will be heard at whatever time here on Extra Sports 1300. My thanks to DJ Michaels back at the Extra Sports 1300 studios. Back in studio tomorrow at 3 here on Extra Sports 1300.